Cops of Reddit, what strange or obscure laws does your town require you to enforce? Strippers can't touch you unless you're a close relative. My entire town outlaws wearing masks with the exception of the night of Halloween. I'm a cop, and don't let me catch you wrestling a bear. That's illegal in these parts. Not a cop, but whale fishing is illegal here. In the middle of Nebraska, we also have a navy. Windshield wipers are mandatory on your car here, but there's no law that requires a windshield. Cop in Australia, if I catch you with having more than 50 kilograms of potatoes in your possession I will arrest you, mostly because it would be hilarious. Then they'll unarrest you because who really gives a shit? Still illegal in Western Australia though. Actually a law enforced in my town. If more than 3 people would like to live together, 2 of them must be related. This is a college town. So if 5 dudes wanted to live together, at least 2 of them would have to be related. It's not enforced as much my private renters, but property managers and such have to follow the law. Mine has a thing against gold painted living statues. Not a cop, but I was once ticketed for wasting finite resources in AZ. I was speeding. I'm cop. This is a super old law but it never got taken away. Stealing someone's livestock is punished by death. This one can be used too. Spitting on a sidewalk is a miss. I'm not a cop, but my township doesn't allow drive-thrus to have deep fryers. The only food-based drive-thru in my entire township of 65,000 people is one Tim Hortons. Park ranger law enforcement here. I did a detail in Joshua Tree and asked about strange laws they had. I was told that possession of balloons was unlawful because tortoises like shiny things. Try to eat them and die. I'm a cop in Vermont. Public nudity is legal in most cities but there's a persistent myth even among fellow officers that you can't take off your clothes in public. So essentially you'd have to walk out of your house naked, despite no basis at all for it. I've had supervisors try to insist I enforce the myth. When my friends and I were 15 we bought some cheap kites at the dollar store and decided to take them with us downtown. We live in Chicago, and fly them. We started trying to fly them by the Art Institute when we got stopped by a cop. He told us that kites were not allowed to be flown anywhere in the downtown area and if he saw us doing it again he would give us a $250 citation. It seemed kind of weird since Millennium and Grant Park were both in the downtown area, but we didn't argue. Years later I found out that it actually was an obscure law, but a law that was repealed in the 1970s. Turns out we were just fine flying our kites and that cop was just a D that didn't like seeing us having fun. Local law against swearing in public. I'd be the biggest hypocrite enforcing that law. Journalist who reports on cops here. Motorcyclists must always have 2 feet on the ground when stopped. There's a law in a city near me that it's illegal for women to buy hats without their husbands on Wednesdays. Not a cop. The town I work for it is legal to openly drink alcohol in all parks. Dogs are not allowed in any park. In Germany you get imprisoned for up to 10 years if you cause a nuclear explosion but don't hurt anybody or destroy anything. In Minnesota, if 3 or more Indians are on the street together it is considered a gang war party and can be freely open fired upon. Has been used to justify police brutality. Not a cop but I was reporter in a college town when our town council made it illegal to walk around in a turgid state. My friends and I made a bunch of turgid state t-shirts and hoodies and paid for our tuition. A town around here doesn't allow microwaves in restaurants. This prevents fast food chains and drive-thrus from pushing out the mom and pop guys since the big guys all use microwaves. Obligatory not cop, but illegal to hit a Canadian goose with your car. You'll at the very least get slapped with a fine. Have personally watched it happen because the person was too impatient to wait for them to cross. Until pennies went out of use in my country, you couldn't purchase anything over 25 cents all in pennies. Not a cop. Just grew up poor and a few local shops were sticklers about the law, though some weren't aware it was a thing at all. Not a cop, but in my home state, if you ride your horse to school, It is the school's responsibility to feed and water it. Every year, people would get together and ride their horses to school and the horses would stay in the football field. Nothing odd that we're required to enforce, but there's a few here and there that we can if we feel the need. A useful one that went in recently is those odd colored headlights and tail lights. I only give out warnings for it, but it always throws people for a loop being stopped for it. I believe it's still law in Orange County, California to not feed lobster to inmates more than 2 eggs per week. The law stems from when lobster was considered trash and a common bycatch from local ocean fishery. It seems the solution was to use them as protein in the local jails, and the prisoners revolted. Edit. Clarity: not more than 2 eggs per week. I am retired from the cop game, but I did it for almost 20 years. This is more of a state law and I was not required to enforce it, but one night I had to go back to a house 4 times due to a married couple arguing very loudly. No violence was involved. I advised them on my 3rd visit that maybe it would be best if one of them spent the night somewhere else so they could cool off. Both of them refused to leave, so I asked them to try and settle the situation because I didn't want to have to visit them again, and I went on my way. On my final return visit they were outside in the driveway, and as I was walking up I heard the female admit to sleeping with someone else the night before, so I arrested her for adultery, which is a misdemeanor in that state, and took her to jail. I didn't have to go back that night. In Toronto, you may not drag your dead horse down Yonge Street on a Sunday. Weird South Carolina laws. Horses may not be kept in bathtubs. It is a capital offense to inadvertently kill someone while attempting suicide. It is perfectly legal to beat your wife on the courthouse steps on Sundays. Not a cop. Half of the comments are going to start like this. My state has a law against ice cream in your back pocket, which a lot of other states have surprisingly, because if a horse followed you home, then it would become your horse. So this law is to curb it. Weird. The town where I went to college, houses were not allowed to have more than 10 bedrooms. Also, every floor of the house had to have a functioning toilet. It was weird because you would go to a house party and there would be a toilet in the middle of the basement, not in its own room, out in the open. Usually they were next to the laundry machines because that's where the plumbing was. Not a cop, but living in Buenos Aires. 1. Naming law. Pretty sure it's still a thing here. There's a pre-approved list of names that one can only choose from when naming a newborn. I think it has about 13,800 names on it, but that might be out of date. 2. There is a nationwide ban on alcohol on the night before an election. 3. Couples are required to take blood tests before getting married. For instance, STD while spreadable equals no nups. 4. Prenups and wills are often ignored. Yikes. 5. I guess featherbeds are illegal here, because such an indulgence induces and encourages lascivious feelings. Cool. Edit. Formatting. Where I live, 5 or more women living in the same building together is considered a brothel. It's not enforced in the way that if you find yourself with 4 female roommates the cops are gonna bust down your door, but it makes for interesting repercussions at the university I attend. First of all, the sororities are not allowed to have houses, because the university would be operating a brothel in a legal sense. It also means all the dorm buildings have to be co-ed floors to work around this. The problem with that is the male to female enrollment at my school is about 7-3, so the female dorms are very spread out across campus. Really, it's just one of those laws that was forgotten about and never changed, but it is relevant in ways you wouldn't think of right off the bat. Arrested a guy for a leash law violation before. City requires you maintain physical control of any animal in public, and specifically states a leash may be no longer than 6 feet. Call about a verbal disturbance in one of the parks. Get there and this dude is just being a complete arsehole to this family just trying to have a barbecue, which is permitted. Don't really have anything to arrest him on and he refuses to leave or at least go to a different area of the park. Then I notice he has one of those retractable leashes attached to his dog. Told him he was in violation of our city ordinance as the leash mechanism stated it went to 16 feet in length and it was clearly maxed out. Few minutes of the guy continuing to be an idiot and not leave. So I hooked him up for the leash law. Had another officer take the dog home to the family. I once got a ticket in front of my own house at 3 in the morning. My offense, Japa King. Hingameme has a law against colored and or flashing Christmas lights on the exterior of any home on Main Street. Solid white lights only. Head of household is supposed to own a gun. I mean, they don't really enforce it, but we get a lot of recognition for it. Edited to say that I'm not a cop. Just blind and missed the first word. Oops. Filipino here. It's pretty much accepted for cops, or anyone for that matter, to just murder people who are suspected to use or sell drugs. Edit. I have to clarify. This isn't really a law in the traditional sense. More like an accepted truth of living in the Philippines. Edit 2. Changed legal to accepted. I can see how my choice in words and oversimplification of the situation can confuse or even upset people. For that, I apologize. It is not my intention. To clarify again, it is very much illegal to commit murder even if the victim is a drug dealer or user. It is just that the authorities tend to turn a blind eye when it comes to investigating such cases, sometimes simply because of disdain for drug dealers' users. Because it was done by state-sponsored death squads, off the record, of course, or because they were the ones committed the killing themselves. I am not a cop, but I've got a doozy of a story for you. I'm from Cleburne County, Alabama. We were a dry county up until the 70s when the probate judge, who was also a Baptist minister, realized that the county was going to go wet, so he added a stipulation: no cold beer. For 30 odd years, only warm beer was sold in Cleburne County. Some people went over the mountain to get it cold. Some stores actually had a deal where if you bought a case of beer they would give you a bag of ice. The tiny town of Fruithurst was once a major wine destination before Prohibition. There was a massive hotel and people from around the country would come and try the famous wine and see the vast vineyards. Fast forward beyond Prohibition and into the early 21st century. The Fruithurst Winery Company opened after doing lots of research on whether or not the law loophole actually applied to them. As they discovered, the probate judge actually ducked up the wordage and the county actually could have sold cold beer the entire time. They went ahead and ran it on the ballot again just to be on the safe side, and it passed overwhelmingly. Fun side note. There was a man who went to prison for selling cold beer at his gas station. After the laws were found to be faulty, I asked my mother if that meant he would be pardoned, and she said no, because he also sold illegal fireworks and bootleg movies.